Good morning, St. John's. Like Nick said, it's a beautiful fall Sunday, and we're so glad that you all are here in the pews with us, and it's good to be together. And if you are worshiping in the online balcony with us this morning, we love you and we see you too. We're just glad to all be together. So, this is going to be sort of a BOGO sermon, 2 for 1, because I'm good, but I'm not good enough to weave it all together. So, it's really going to be your stewardship sermon and then some other stuff. Lucky dogs, more than you bargained for. So listen, October is Stewardship Month at St. John's, the month that we all love the best, the month in which we usually talk about how everything we have comes from whom? Okay, good. From whom? There we go. And how, since we are made in the image of this loving, joyful, giving God, it is good for us to be loving and joyful and giving too. In fact, let's pull out this old chestnut. It's not just good, it's... I have to punch up the stewardship sermon somehow, you know what I'm saying? But let's be honest, here's the thing. We might call October Stewardship Month, but that's really a misnomer because, in truth, every month is Stewardship Month. Because every month is a month in which we are alive by God's goodness, mercy, and love. We are blessed by God's goodness, mercy, and love. We each have something to give by God's goodness, mercy, and love. Our theme for our stewardship season this year, chosen by our stewardship committee, is Devoted Together, which comes from the book of Acts, chapter 2, where it describes the early church in their first few days and how they were devoted together to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And here in our St. John's Bible that we have on loan for us this year, take a look when you come up for communion, because this illumination goes with that passage. And there are all the saints and disciples there gathered together around the table, devoted together. Because they were devoted together, they shared all they had in common, and they loved one another, and they worshiped God, and they saw their lives changed. And it says that while they did all of that, God added daily to their number. They didn't even have to add daily to their number. God provided the growth because they were just being faithful. This, my friends, is exactly what continues to happen here at this place that we love called St. John's. This is what God is doing in our midst as we strive to be devoted together and to dig into what matters most, the apostles' teaching and fellowship, the breaking of bread, and the prayers. Y'all, that's the stuff you come here for, whether you knew it or not. That is why you are here. We are alive and well at St. John's Episcopal Church because we are devoted together and the Spirit is moving in this place. So, as we get into this month and love this life that we share together by God's goodness, mercy, and love, there are 2 things that I want to say to you about stewardship today. Number 1, I want you to always remember, no matter who you are, where you've come from, where you're going, what you think you have, what you think you don't have, what you missed out on, what you have in abundance, whatever that looks like, whoever you are, you have deep within you a spiritual need to give. You have within you a spiritual need to be a giving person in one way or another. And we don't give because our church has a budget that needs to be met. That's not it at all. Who cares about that? Cindy, close your ears. Our treasurer, she's sitting right there. I'm going somewhere good with it, I promise. But no, budgets are budgets. And yes, that's part of our life together. But no, we give because we are made in God's image. And our God is a giving God. Giving is written on our spiritual DNA. It is just part of who we are. And a Christian life without the joy of giving is a Christian life incomplete. So that's number 1. You have a spiritual need to give. Repeat after me. I have a spiritual need to give. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2, And this is something that I try to always tell our newcomers. There are three things that I say at our newcomers classes and our Growing in Grace classes. I say, look, if you're going to be part of St. John's, I want you to know we have some expectations of one another in our life together. And so these expectations, one is it's a no-brainer. We expect that we'll be in worship weekly. That's just part of the deal of being a Christian. And so if you're not able to be here on Sunday mornings, well then maybe come for the Wednesday service or join us in the online balcony. Or shoot, I don't care if you're in another town, go to another church. I don't even care if it's an Episcopal church. Just go be with Christians and worship. And if you go to one of those other churches, steal one of the bulletins and bring it to me. I like to see what other people are up to. So you need to be in worship every week as a Christian. You also need to have a ministry as a Christian. Now that might mean that you're involved in a ministry here in and through St. John's, or it might mean that right now in this season of life, your ministry is caring for an elderly parent or for your spouse or for your child who you have to shake into her tights every Sunday morning to get her here on time. All of that is ministry too. But all Christians, in addition to being in worship, need to have a ministry. And then the final thing that I always tell them is be an intentional giver. And when I say intentional, what I mean is don't be accidental about your giving. Don't just throw to God whatever happens to be left in your wallet on a given day as though God is a little dog lucky to get our scraps. Half of us don't carry cash in our wallets anymore anyway. No. Know what you give. Know what it is that you wish to give to God. You do that with your rent or your mortgage. You do that with your gas or your food. Why would we not do that for the God of love and the friendship and ministries that we count on? We all count on together right here at St. John's. And some people say that the Bible says that we're supposed to give 10%. Great, fine, wonderful. If you can do that, super. But maybe, like most people, you are in no position to give 10% of your income toward the ministries of God. Maybe when you sit at your kitchen table and you pray and you think and you look things over as you're planning for the next year, maybe what you see is that you're able to give 5% or 3% or shoot, 1%. Fine. The point is, be intentional about it. Have those conversations with yourself and with God and with the people in your household. Because being an intentional giver means you know what it is you're wanting to give to God and you commit to it. And so you fill out your pledge card and you join us in this life of ours together. And together we build this place up with love and we are devoted together. And if next year when you repeat the process and you're at your kitchen table all over again, you're able to make the stretch and bump it up 0.5%, great. The point is we're supposed to be in this together. The point is everybody has a need to give. The point is everybody has something to give. And we are made in the image of a giving God. We have a spiritual need to be givers too. And when it comes to giving back to God, some of what God has given to us, the giving is all the sweeter when we do it on purpose and not accidentally. Here endeth most of the stewardship sermon. Amen. But wait, there's more. All right, so speaking of giving and fellowship, today is the day in our year of the Bible. If you're new with us, we're doing a little different kind of thing this year. We're sort of reading the Bible together as a church family through the year, and we have landed square on the day when God gives the law, the 10 Commandments, to the people of Israel. And there are 3 things that I want to tell y'all about the law. See, I got points all over the place. 2 stewardship points, 3 10 Commandment points. Here we go. Number 1, the law is a container. Y'all repeat that after me. The law is a container. Number 2, the law cannot be broken. And number 3, when it comes to the law, we need help. Try to contain your enthusiasm, everyone. All right. So number 1, the law is a container. What in the world does that mean? What kind of container? Well, the law, and when I say the law, I'm talking about all the law contained in the Old Testament, but just for today's purposes, let's just focus in on the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are a container for what? A container for relationships. For all that we might say here at St. John's about being devoted together and enjoying the apostles' teaching and fellowship, the breaking of bread and the prayers, the truth is all this stuff has its start in this moment in the history of the people of Israel. Have you ever noticed that the Ten Commandments are entirely about relationship? The first four deal with right relationship with God, and the second six deal with right relationship with one another. It is like a container, a boundary, parameters for living our life together with God and one another, because let me tell you something, I don't know if you've looked around at humanity, but we need guidelines and parameters and containers. Otherwise, we can sort of get off and do our own thing in some weird ways. Case in point, sermon example for you, here we go. Last night, I went to a certain football game, and afterwards, I was trying to get out of the parking deck near a certain football stadium, and there we were, and we were trapped, y'all. Have you ever had to get out of a parking deck after a football game? So all the cars were trying to get out, and some had backed into their spaces, so they were trying to move forward. Some were trying to back out. And right there was just this nightmare of congestion. We must have been sitting there for 30, 40 minutes. Those of y'all have heard me say it before, who say, "Oh, Father Lonnie, I went to the game last night, so I couldn't go to church." I'm here. So there we were stuck forever, and all we had to guide us was the sign that said, "Out." And we were all like, yeah, we know, we want out, but we can't get out. And there was nobody there to help us, no guidelines, no parameters. And then all of a sudden, there's this kerfuffle, which is as polite a word as I can come up with. And this woman gets out of her car and starts screaming at this man who gets out of his truck, and they start yelling at each other. And she bows up and she's, "Why don't we handle this like adults?" And I thought, I don't even know what that means. And then I took out my phone and I filmed some of it, because I too am a lawless and terrible person. I told myself I was filming it so that if the law showed up, I could show them. I'd have evidence. But let's all be honest, I just did it because I'm a bad person. Finally, they calmed down, I guess. Everybody got on out. But it was one of those moments where it was like, we need guidance in our lives. We need parameters, boundaries. We need the law because we need relationships. The law is a container for right relationships. And when the law is missing, we start getting out of our trucks and bowing up at one another after the football game. Go Knowles. Number two, you cannot break the law of God. Our psalm today says as much. The very first line, if you paid attention, says, "The law of the Lord is perfect." When I was a teenager, being the young church nerd that I was, I wanted to study the Bible a little more deeply. And there was this college professor at Valdosta State University named Willa Valencia, one of the best names of anybody ever on the planet, Willa Valencia. And I went to her and I said, "Dr. Willa, you're really smart about the Bible. I'd like to study it a little bit. Would you do some Bible study with me?" And so we would meet every Friday morning. I remember nothing of any of our discussions for that entire year of my life except one thing. We got to the Ten Commandments, and she looked at me. She leaned across the table, and she said, "Lonnie, you need to understand something about the law of God. The law of God is perfect. You cannot break it. Because it itself is perfect, you can only break yourself on it." Yeah. The law is perfect. God's law is perfect. Can't break it, but you can sure break yourself on it, which basically amounts to what Jesus is saying about how we can stumble over even the chief cornerstone, break ourselves on it. That stone's not going to break. We can break ourselves on the law, which is part of why I wanted to share this with y'all today. Today is a show and tell kind of sermon. So we put several of these in each of the pews, about 3 per pew, so share them around, make sure that everyone can see one. So this comes from the St. John's Bible. This comes from the book of Exodus. The volume that we have here at St. John's on loan this year is just the Gospels and Acts, but we have rights to all the art digitally. And every week that goes by, I think, oh, shoot, they didn't get to see the beautiful one about creation. Oh, no, they didn't get to see this one. Oh, no, they didn't get to see this one. Well, oh, yes, you get to see this one today. This is their representation in the St. John's Bible of the Ten Commandments. They wanted to do something different with the representation of the Ten Commandments, and yet still faithful. Now, when you think of the Ten Commandments, maybe you think of Charlton Heston coming down with his carved stone tablets. I sort of think of my grandpa's wood-paneled living room where he had the picture of Jesus right here, the picture of grandma's dog right here, and in between the Ten Commandments all laid out in nice calligraphy so that you can read each and every one of them. But this obviously does something different with the Ten Commandments. It forces you to really actually look at it and study it to figure out what's going on. So the first thing you need to know about these illuminations in the St. John's Bible is that whenever you see gold, like on here, when you come up and look at this image during communion, you'll see that it's real gold leaf. And so on this, because it came off the photocopier, you don't get the gold leaf. But every time there's gold, it's meant to represent divinity. It's meant to represent God. They didn't want to make images of God in this Bible, so instead they put gold so that every time you see something that's supposed to represent God, what do you see reflected in the gold? You see your own face, because you, my friends, bear the image of the living God. And so up top here, you have the words, "Here I am. I am God of your father. I am the Lord your God." And then it goes on to say, "You shall have no other gods before me." But all that divine stuff right there in gold. And the 4 panels that are there up at the very top represent the burning bush, the first Passover, the crossing of the Red Sea, and the 12 pillars erected at the foot of Mount Sinai. So that's all great up top, but what do you notice as your eyes go down the page on this piece of art? Well, as you get deeper into it, it's almost like the words begin to lose their legibility. It's like they become hard to recognize, a little jumbled up. I was doing a Bible study earlier this week on Zoom, and I asked the participants, I said, "What does that tell you?" And somebody said, "Well, it's kind of like how the noise of the world can creep in and make it hard to hear the law and the word and the commandments of God." Somebody else said, "Well, to me it kind of feels like we might take the law for granted. Like, yeah, you see the 10 Commandments around, but do we really know them? Do we really hold them in our hearts?" And then someone else said, "Well, it kind of makes me think that the further you get from God, the more life begins to sort of disintegrate. Things become less clear, like in a parking lot next to Doak Campbell." But here's what the person who created this piece says. They says that for them, the giving of the law was like God doing creation again, bringing order to the chaos of our lives. And so the artist didn't really want your eyes to go from top to bottom. The artist wanted your eyes to go from bottom to top. God bringing order to the chaos of our lives and bringing it more and more and more into God's divine light. But if you notice, down at that very bottom part where all the pieces are all broken up, you can still discern some little letters in there. And if you look hard enough and circle each one, what you will find is that there in the midst of all of those is that same sentence as up top. "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." Meaning that even when life is totally chaotic, God is still in the mix, bringing order to our lives, because God knows we struggle to keep the law. We can only break ourselves on it. And that leads me to the final point, number 3. We need help. When it comes to the law, we need help, and that's where Jesus comes in. None of us can keep the law of God perfectly, but there is one who can and who has. He is the one who makes sense of all of it, who sorts out the chaos, who brings us into right relationship with God and into fellowship with one another. Y'all, Jesus is the new container, the fulfillment of this old one, the one who says, yeah, try your best, but you don't have to worry about breaking yourself anymore. Because listen, I've been broken for you once and for all. So stick with me, kiddo, he says, because I've got you. That, too, is why you come to this place. You come to this place with all of your brokenness, whatever part of the law you broke this week or last night or this morning, you bring it to this place where Jesus is perpetually broken for you and for me and for us. He who is the container of all things divine, of all of our relationships. And you come to this altar rail and you put your little hands out like this. You make a container with your hands. Don't give me the lobster pinchies like that. Put your hand out like a cradle, like a container. And he who is contained, all that sweetness of Jesus in that bread, places himself gently in your own hands so that you can be in right relationship with God and with one another. And y'all, all you had to do was wake up, show up, and put your hands out. He has fulfilled the law for you. He has made up the difference. He has made a way home for you, and you are here now. For all we might say about stewardship at St. John's and our spiritual need to give, Jesus is the clearest picture of all. He is the intentional giver beyond all intention. He is the selfless giver beyond all selflessness. He has not just kept 10 commandments, he's kept them all. He has not just given 10% of himself, he has given us everything, and he does so day after day, week after week. So, my friends, come on. Come on. Join the great throng, because we worship a selfless, giving God who thrives on relationship with us, so much so that he has come to us to be the container and to be the relationship. There is nothing else for you left to do but to love and give in return and in response, and for us to be devoted together. Amen.